Next up is Cotaluna and the Long Road North. Cotaluna are royalty at this stage for what they are. They are established in the minds of almost everyone who gives a shit about challenging heavy music by this point. They have one of the most obsessive, worship their every move fan bases that a band like them can have, and almost feels like they've achieved practically everything a band like them could hope to achieve with this music. But we have had a glut of Cotaluna material in recent years with a real burst in productivity. I almost wonder whether it's possible to be overexposed to a band like Cotaluna, who do have a very clear ownership of a sound that they tinker with from record to record. What do you reckon on that front?
Yeah, I think especially with the last couple of years, because we've had the Raging River last year, and then we had A Dawn to Fear. It's just weird that all these things are just coming out in such quick succession, and that most people are saying that they're all brilliant. And they all come from the same kind of recording, well, not the same kind of writing sessions as well. Like a lot of it from the Raging River and this came from the Dawn to Fear sessions, and I think it's quite cool how they have changed that sound over those two releases, even though they essentially came from the same place.
Well, last year we had the Raging River EP, which you mentioned, which incidentally was longer than the Korn album we just reviewed. But rather than being... We were sold it at the time as a kind of like coda EP to A Dawn to Fear. That was what it was described as. It's ended up being, closer in time frame to this brand new album, and it now, I think, feels more like a bridge between that record and this one, because this post-Mariner output of Cult of Luna is, as you say, beginning to feel like its own little interconnected era in their discography to me. There's a world between them that feels a little bit shared. It's a really organic and naturalistic like sound. Sam, when we reviewed the Raging River last year, you were very much on board with it and said that a comparatively bite-sized record like that was helping ease you on board to what Cotaluna do. We've now got a proper album furthering those kind of worlds.
Well, so I have kind of only existed in sort of the world of Cult of Luna post Mariner. I've not gone back before that yet, because it is still hella intimidating to look at that. But so because I've had this kind of neat little, not little, is vast and huge, but this kind of era of Cult of Luna where you're right, they all seem to have this nice through line. I found it has been more digestible. I was a little bit hitting play. This was like, God, some of these tracks are long, and there's a lot of them. But given, as I've said a few times in the last few years, I am opening up to this kind of stuff more. And I think just credit to the songwriters Cult of Luna, I just sucked into this again. They pull you into their world, and you live there the entire time this is going on.
Well, you say about this being, daunting. It's 69 minutes long, which is about 10 minutes shorter than their last full-length album. So, there you go. It's taken me a little bit of time, this. This is the album of everything we reviewed thus far this year, I think, actually, that I've been listening to the longest. But that's Cult of Luna. It's always how it goes. And every time I've come back to this, particularly in the last week or so, I have been more firmly placed in the palm of its gargantuan hand and gotten more out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I still need to give this a lot more listens to really get into it, and I've listened to it a lot, but there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, I mean, open an album like fucking Inception and you've sold me already. I was one of the few people on the planet who didn't really gel with A Dawn to Fear. I still don't really. I don't know why. It just doesn't grab my attention, and I like the Raging River a lot more. I just think they've gotten better. The quality of the records from that session is just better. It's like they save the best till last. This is fucking great. You're saying about it being 69 minutes long. It does not feel like that at all, despite what you're saying about you look at the track list, you're like, oh fucking hell, there's a lot of songs, and several of them are 11 minutes long or something. Does not feel like that at all.
No, I agree. It does, I think because it's so, transportative that it doesn't feel like I'm sort of looking at the clock and waiting to see how it runs out. I mean, this album makes me feel tiny. From the moment Cold Burn begins, and it's just the intensity and the weight of this sound, those guitar chords just being we mentioned this on the radio about how thick the guitar like sound on for Cult of Luna is, and the drumming being just so booming that you feel like it's shaking your insides. Like it is just like dwarfs everything around it, but it is so captivating.
Well, you said about how, these songs, they don't necessarily feel as long as they are. I think Cold Burn is a great example of what something that immediately occurs that affects that is no one is kind of writing that kind of song the way the Cult of Luna do it. And part of it is the creativity in beat that underpins it remains one of the most underrated facets. Like, the drummer in this band is at a level of few other bands in their lane, and that's before you add on the extra bits of percussion and stuff that's going on. His patterns and that progressive element to how they lock you in but kind of extend their arms and shift over time, it puts it at an immediate level of momentum and interest that, capturing that it's 9-minute runtime that song only capitalizes on, and that I think really it just puts you in place and gives you that kind of anchor to really go with them. They've gotten really fucking good at album openers. Like, I think that The Silent Man on A Dawn to Fear is also stellar, and this kind of takes after that quite nicely. That weepy, bluesy guitar line that comes in around 5 minutes in and just lifts the fucking song spectacularly is the kind of emotion and just gorgeous painting with sound that you get from a band on Cult of Luna's level that the Chancers can't.
Yeah, like, and that solo, that how it kind of moves into that, like, kind of a minute later, that kind of garbled tapping stuff. Like, you got to remember, this song basically is like a variation on like one or two riffs, pretty much. But what you're saying about the drummer, what I think it shares with something like Zeal and Ardor, what we were just talking about like 20 minutes ago or something, is a kind of like heaving, almost industrial take on their genre. Like, I think since Vertical is almost like this kind of mechanical take on post metal, but like those little variations you're talking about are so vital in making it just feel like it is moving along, because it does. And it's like, again, like, you're looking at the clock and like it's been like 9 minutes or whatever, and it just whizzes past.
So that's my thing with this as well. It is constantly, it's building on you like I say, there's one or two riffs, but it's always adding things onto it. There's a band we're going to talk about a bit later who I had a lot of trouble with one of their songs for not doing that. We'll get onto that in the review, but I never found myself having that problem with Cult of Luna, because it is constantly propelling forward, even if it's subtle tweaks here and there, but it never feels like it's just sort of treading water and holding its place, waiting for the dam to burst. You feel that it's always pushing against that dam and breaking it down rather than kind of waiting for it to happen.
Well, the title of this record comes from Johannes, the singer in this band and primary lyricist, packing up his bags and moving from Stockholm up north to the mountains and forests of northern Sweden and that kind of countryside. And there was a Vreed album last year called Wild Northwest that was like drawing a parallel between like rural regions of Scandinavia as a black metal band and like the Wild West. And this record is more appropriate for that in atmosphere, I think, because there's an incredible, when you said it makes you feel small, there's like a nomadic sense of landscape to this album that you are like, the fucking Lone Ranger in the middle of. And part of it is, it feels like on the last few records, they've been upping those like sliding on the frontier style guitars that just have that richness of landscape in them, and it means that you get a song here like An Offering to the Wild, which starts like a Cult of Luna film score to a western, or the title track, which is like a even darker, more kind of nervy side of that same coin. And it's like wide open spaces when you listen to it, and it feels quite liberating and quite freeing just to go into a space like that.
An Offering to the Wild, that, what you said about being like feeling just tiny, Sam, that like, I feel like I'm in a Cormac McCarthy novel. Everything is hopeless. Someone is going to start shouting at me without speech marks. Like, it's so fucking vast, isn't it? Like that. I mean, it all is, but that in particular, that is the one where you got stuff like that mad kind of like sax in the background, which again is like on paper kind of ludicrous, but just the way that it is mixed in with like that military snare and the kind of like fucking xylophone or whatever, like is all hooked around that, like that kind of military beat. Again, that is one of those songs that it features Colin Stetson, the guy who did the Hereditary soundtrack, and just having him on there, just making it just feel scary, is a real album highlight in an album full of highlights.
Yeah, like all those little touches, and the fact that Johannes doesn't even come into like halfway through that song.
Like it's about the 5.5 minute mark that his vocals come in.
And he finally comes in, even then, it doesn't feel like you've been waiting for it. It just because there's been so much happening in that time before in the instrumental that it's just like when he comes in, vocals, like it just took me off guard. But it just that song, like 12 minutes or like 12 minutes 43 seconds long, and it just is. It uses every second of that time like to such great effect.
It breathes for exactly how long it needs to, because that, again, where that vocal part comes in 30 seconds or so before that, there's one of those gorgeous, lead guitar lines that's so effective at bringing the song forward. You almost wonder if it's going to be an instrumental. Going back to the mind's eye image of this album, there's a song like Full Moon, which is a 3-minute interlude. Those tracks can feel kind of irrelevant compared to the behemoths that they are surrounded by, but that one drills so directly into that mental image conjured by this album. It's almost definitive of it. And songs on this, like the Silver Ark, which isn't necessarily the most spectacularly individual song they've ever done, but everything they put onto their records is so solidly crafted to draw you further and further into this like marathon that you've embarked on with them. It's like Sam in Lord of the Rings when he's like, one more step and it's the farthest away from home I'll ever have been. Like, they feel like individual important steps into something that is like vast and bigger than you. And every one of those, longer songs really adds something and brings something to the table that the previous one hadn't done. Blood Upon Stone right at the end has this like acerbic twang to it that reminded me of like Kurt Ballou's more drawn out guitar playing on like Worms Will Feed or whatever, those kind of songs. It's really nasty, but there's just this absolute level of majesty to them that it's grand without being showy. It just feels like it's a fucking like a wonder of the world or something, like a natural creation. And the way they carefully introduce constructive bits of percussion and whatnot at different places in the mix, so it feels like it's being played by an army of people. They are the metal band that have that kind of orchestral level to them without necessarily actually having to use a literal orchestra.
Yeah. You were saying about how each song kind of has a little bit like Into the Night being far more atmospheric and really haunting, or having those like little glimmers of beauty. It kind of goes for a really like oppressive sound without having to go like sonically heavy as the other tracks on them, which again it's its own unique little journey within this album. And how they make everything sound so big without having like this full orchestra and all these other bits, whilst it's just so like inspiring every time they do it.
There's so much stuff going on, but like to kind of bring up Zeal and Ardor again, how the thing that you guys maybe weren't sold on was it's just like wow, this is happening, and it's like just like grabbing things. Like this is just swallowing all the different elements. So like when they are introduced, it almost I kind of don't realize. So like the Silver Ark, that weird like retching noise about 5 minutes in, or like Beyond One, which has got that jazz singer, I think it's Mariam Valentin. Like she's got that aged, weathered quality, almost kind of like Iggy Pop has nowadays or something. It's really weird and it's really creepy, and it ends like leaving you wanting more and scratching the surface, but it doesn't delve into the point where you pine for her, kind of like how I felt with Julie Christmas on Mariner, when there's that one song where she's not on it. I'm like, where's she gone? Like Mariam here is just like this tiny little flavor, which she is essential to the record, but it's just like a few minutes.
Well, it's like these kind of unique haunting sights and sounds that you get along this outdoors journey. And Beyond 2 with Colin Stetson again brings out that more throbbing ambient side, which sounds so full and enveloping. Electronics are used incredibly subtly. What you're saying about them, it doesn't jump around kind of maniacally or anything. It's just odd little moments when you might get something that's kind of peripherally twisting something else, like the way the title track towards the end has this almost reverberating kind of telephone-like sounds, just kind of like beaming out of it. And there was a shift that came on A Dawn to Fear of using more like organs and stuff instead of full fucking electronics, which gives it that more kind of organic, earthy sound. It's still paying dividends for them, I think. And on songs like Into the Night, it's like that the work with Mark Lanigan on last year's EP has kind of rubbed off on Johannes, and you get that like ghostly as hell fucking waltzing with a spirit. For anyone who's like new to Cult of Luna and expects like a full-on sludge band, it's not in the way a doom band is, like super big riff based all the time. I only really twigged quite how unriffy it was when that fucking huge low end one starts swinging at the back of An Offering to the Wild, and it feels like a release valve. But it's just those kind of elements are used as dynamically and carefully as anything else, like in the title track, which is a fucking crusher as well.
Yeah. And again, that title track, you're saying it's crushing, and like it is. It's so like your head is being squeezed, but at the same time, it's got like accordion or something at the end, which again is just testament to them introducing it in a way that is not like wacky or something, because it could be so easy for that to sound crap.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's the way that they morph elements that they add into each track. It's so not showy. It takes quite a bit of really intentful listening to really isolate exactly what different ideas are being brought in, as opposed to something like a Zealanada, where the genre mashups and whatnots are so just transparent and kind of in your face and pretty much define the songs. This is just, it's masterfully delicate on a fucking huge, broad scale.
It never stops to draw attention to the shifts and the turns. It kind of just naturally feeds everything in a way that like you won't pick up on them all on your first listen, probably not even your second or third listen. But when you really just delve into it and exist in it, you'll find new little things, and it's so rewarding in that way.
Classy in it, like the Keanu Reeves of post metal, you know, like donating to charity, but not telling anyone about it.
Yeah, unlike you, Alec, I ended up really loving A Dawn to Fear after Mariner achieved something that they couldn't possibly replicate again just on their own. And where, again, this has needed me to keep chipping away at it, that sense of outdoors exploration you get from it, from a piece of music, it's quite remarkable. The Long Road North by Cult of Luna